I have received numerous emails from ordinary people asking me to explain the That's a Lie program I used to get rid of the voices I heard as a young woman. I did this on my own without the help of psychologists or psychiatrists or their toxic drugs. For those of you who hear voices or are consumed by strong and obsessive negative thoughts, it is critical that you understand that the voices and persistent negative thoughts that plague you are not yours. They come from outside of you and do not belong to you. They are not hallucinations and you are not crazy. They are energy parasites and must turn your energy negative in order to utilize it as food. Their survival depends on draining and feeding off of your negative energy. These are the same negative spirits known by the Gnostics in ancient times as Archons and demons in today's biblical literature. One big lie perpetrated by the establishment is that all people are powerless to combat this disease. The truth is, this is not a disease. You are being attacked by a parasitic force outside yourself that installs negative thoughts into your mind in order to generate negative emotional energy which they absorb from you as food. You have experienced for yourselves how completely drained and depressed you feel after being consumed by negative thoughts. The That's a Lie program is a mental program designed to empower you. It is a program nothing and no one can take it away from you, except you. I am told by a clinical psychologist friend that this program has also worked to help victims of schizophrenia get rid of the voices they hear. That's a Lie program, how it developed and how it works. I think the best way to explain how I was able to send away the negative spirits that plagued me for years is to tell you a story. It begins some 40 years ago, after I'd already spent several years researching the brain to learn what was wrong with me and how to fix it. My initial research centered on conventional science. What I learned about the mechanics of the brain was interesting but didn't help much as it only dealt with the material world. The voices that haunted me were not of that world. The story begins when a friend of mine was going on a trip around the world and would be gone for 4 months. She invited me to house sit for her and babysit her Yorkshire Terrier. I jumped at the chance to live in a beautiful home in Mill Valley, California, secluded from everyone else in San Francisco. At that time, I was struggling with how to forgive my ex and his new wife for taking my children from me and then poisoning their minds against me. This seclusion was a perfect opportunity for that effort. The day after I moved in and said bon voyage to my friend, I went to a bookstore to browse around when a book fell off the shelf landing right at my feet. I picked it up to put it back on the shelf, but first I flipped through its pages. It was by Wayne Dwyer called Your Erroneous Zones. I took it to the bookstore coffee shop to browse through before deciding whether to buy it or not, and opened it to a random page which read, "No one can make you feel good or bad. That is your choice. You have the ability to control your thoughts and only you can make yourself happy." I closed the book and whispered, "Oh, my God. I did not know that." This was a pivotal moment for me that changed the course of my life. I took the book back to my friend's house and began reading every page. Many times I put it down to observe my thoughts. I wondered, who is it observing my thoughts? What are thoughts? Where do thoughts come from? Where do thoughts go once we think them? How do I control them if I'm able to step back and watch them appear out of nowhere, realizing they are not coming from me, the watcher? At the end of the 4 months my friend returned from her world tour. She and I had a lot to discuss. First, she had to show me all her slides of places she visited and people she met. She looked vibrant and happy. At supper I told her about the book. "Did you know that you can control your thoughts and that no one can make you feel one way or another unless you allow it?" I asked. She did not know this either, and though her childhood had been quite normal, she loved the idea. She asked if I would leave the book with her. As I drove back to San Francisco to find a new apartment, I continued having revelations about my own mind. In my new apartment, I spent time alone plowing through many texts about the brain and mind before I came across a book by Robert Monroe called Journeys Out of the Body. I practiced some of the exercises the book recommended. They didn't cause me to travel out of my body but did have another astounding effect. I began to see flashes of memory from the first 13 years of my life of which I had previously had no recall. I didn't understand them at first until a floodgate opened and all the memories rushed in suddenly. I was overwhelmed and could not believe the things I was remembering. I felt like a deer in the headlights, understanding but too horrified to process everything all at once. Flashes of my father being enamored with Japanese torture methods and using me as his lab rat from age 3 to 6 surged into my mind. Glimpses of spending 6 months in a juvenile detention center at age 6-1/2 and spending 2 weeks in solitary confinement appeared. Finally, flickers of spending 5 years in a Catholic orphanage where I and 500 other girls suffered stunning emotional and physical abuse until I was released at age 13. Astonished by these memories that were coming up, I sat in the middle of my living room like a stone sculpture. When the movie of memories stopped, I whispered to the empty room, "That's what's wrong. I got brainwashed. What do I do now?" The memory dump revealed that I was mind-controlled through physical and emotional torture. What was so strange is that after the age of 13, my memories of my father are great. He taught me to hunt and fish, and to be self-sufficient in the wilderness. He taught me advanced mathematics and so much more. I grew up loving math and science. It seemed natural that I would study civil engineering as a career path. From everything I had read, I realized that early childhood experiences are embedded into the subconscious as truth. My subconscious truth was first you get tortured, by a man, and then the man treats your cuts, bruises, wounds, and then the man cuddles you and rocks you to sleep and then you feel loved and safe again. This was exactly the scenario I had been playing out in life without ever knowing why. Never would I have understood this, had that dam not broken wide open when it did, and for that I am grateful. On top of that conditioned behavior, the voices kept telling me I was worthlessness in this world, but now with my memory returning, I knew differently. I knew that the horrible things that were done to me, were not things I had caused, chosen, or deserved. So not only did I need to figure out how to overcome being brainwashed to fix my mind, I needed to find out how to get rid of the voices that plagued me and continued to tell me horrible things about myself. When I got back to work after the weekend, my boss called me into his office. "Sherry," he said, "how would you like to learn computer programming?" I said, "Sounds interesting. What's going on?" He leaned back in his chair. "We just got awarded a contract to develop a computerized tracking system for a major water district. I thought you would be the best candidate to head up the project." "Sure," I said, "I'd love the challenge. When do we start?" "Tomorrow," he said. Over the next months I learned computer programming. 15 months later I had written the computer code for the water district's tracking system and they loved it. More than that, I saw a remarkable similarity between how computers process information and how our brains process information, each running on a program that is inserted by an outside programmer. While the computer program operates by its software code, the brain program operates by electrical impulses traveling specific synaptic paths. I wondered if I could write a mental program that would not only tackle the negative thoughts the voices that were hounding me, but also eliminate or deprogram the brainwashed conditioning that was exacerbating the misery in my life. My theory was to write a mental program and train myself to use that new program more than the existing one until the new program became automatic and the existing program atrophied, weakened to the point it could no longer perform, even if I tried. In other words, rewire my brain. I first tried to edit the code in my brain, but it didn't work. It was way too complicated to remember while in the throes of unconscious conditioned responses set off by life events, or during Archon attacks. I needed to think of something easier, something I could remember while in the midst of older programming being triggered by the world around me. I now knew that all the negative things I'd been taught about myself by my parents, the juvenile detention center, the Catholic orphanage, public schools, and society in general with regard to who I really was were not true. It was all lies. I was not a bad and evil person destined to go to hell. I was not a crazy person. I was not a selfish person. I did not hate myself or anyone else. I was not born to hate life, nor was I born to sin. I was not stupid, going nowhere. I was not a bad mother. None of those things were true, and yet, prior to running the new program, I heard this as truth by the voices and felt this as true by the mental conditioning all day and all night long. Because of that, I had seen bewildered surprise in the faces and eyes of others as I watched myself overreacting to their innocent words and walking away in embarrassment. All I could do was cringe at my overreactions later when I was alone. I vowed that if it took me my whole life, I would find a way to fix this. After some trial and error, I designed a mental program called That's a Lie. I actually have Wayne Dwyer to thank for initially setting me on the right track by pointing out that we do have a choice about the way we think. In other words, we have the ability to take control over our own mind. I also give credit and many thanks to Universe for the synchronicity of dropping Wayne's book at my feet and opening the door that allowed me to learn computer programming. It was exactly what I needed to get started on the path toward fixing the root problem so that I could begin to heal. The That's a Lie program worked perfectly on eliminating the brainwashed conditioning, allowing me the mental space I required to become who I wanted to be instead of mindlessly being what others programmed into me. My theory had worked. Once I broke through and conquered the brainwashing effects, I was surprised to find that much of what had been forcefully programmed into my brain as a child was still being utilized by the spirit parasites against me. I was still receiving negative thoughts and messages which sounded exactly like my own thoughts. The prodding and poking, the suggestions, even demands coming from them were beyond anything I could imagine thinking, much less doing. If these thoughts were not coming from me and I could sit back and watch them flow through me and feel disgusted by them, then they were from an outside source. Researching this, I learned about the Archons of ancient times. In 1947, texts were found in clay jars in Nag Hammadi in Egypt, and, on these texts was a story of what the Nag Hammadi people, 2,000 years ago, thought the world was about. In Gnostic belief, Archons were planetary rulers and guardians of the spiritual planes. The Archons were associated with the 7 visible planets, and perceived as agents of the demiurge, predatory beings who inhibit spiritual awakening by convincing humanity of a false reality, forces of sin and temptation. They influence the way you perceive the world, not the world itself. The primary power in the world we inhabit is the indwelling divinity of the planet, the Gaian intelligence, called Sophia by the Gnostics. If you are aligned to the Gaian intelligence, you do not see the world as a place of fear and predation, but of beauty, bounty, and magic. This confirmed that I was not losing my mind but instead being attacked by negative, parasitic spirit beings that are very real. Now it was time to apply the new program to see if it would work on the Archon/demon voices that just would not leave me alone. Once I actually applied the principles and stuck to them, the program worked just as effectively on them as it did on the brainwashing. In essence, this program denies the entities their battle. You are armed with the truth that these parasites tell lies about who you are, lots of them. By not engaging and denying them the battle, you are not generating any food for them. They must have negative energy to survive. They cannot generate it themselves. They have no power of their own. If they cannot evoke negative emotions from you, they have no choice but to leave or starve to death. If you are persistent, they have to leave. Here's how I worked the That's a Lie program. Every time I caught myself having a knee-jerk overreaction to a thought or feeling, I would say, "That's a lie." An example, one of many: someone might say, "You are just a stupid idiot." Instead of allowing the old program to run that would cause me to agree and feel low self-esteem or get angry about what the person said, I would consciously run the new program and say to myself, "That's a lie." My logical mind already knew I was not stupid, but my subconscious mind needed the new program to be repeatedly run in order to create new neural pathways and a different recording. How in the world could I work as a civil engineer and run an international human rights organization, and run my life in spite of all the stuff that had happened to me if I were stupid. The messages these entities were inserting into my mind were insane. Click here to see a list of common lies these entities tell people. Apply the "That's a Lie" program to each and every item on this list. The truth is that each of us is born as a pure being, each with a pure and sovereign spirit, each with the potential to live a happy, productive, healthy and prosperous life. By the time the world gets through with us, running us through the mill and negatively programming us, we forget all of that. For some of us the process is torturous, as was mine. For others the process is like every day hearing and seeing, witnessing people say and do things that are nasty, egotistical, and completely contrary to the purity they were when they first arrived here in the flesh. Thus, our subconscious records these things as truth when it is all lies. With our perception of the world influenced by these lies, we become the perfect feeding ground for these parasites to infest. Unless we call it what it is. Run the "That's a Lie" program every single time you have a negative thought about yourself, even if this means you have to stop in mid-sentence for a redo. Do this until the program becomes automatic. When you do this, you will begin to see profound advancements in communicating with your brilliant higher self. When this becomes automatic, you no longer have to think about it because the old program has atrophied and no longer runs. The software is corrupted. It cannot fire electric impulses along those old pathways because it can't find them. Then new doors and new ways of being and thinking will open to you. The voices, the Archons/demon spirits, are repelled by positive energy, so they will stay at bay. They may periodically return to test the waters, but you will be able to recognize their foul presence and literally shrug them off with "That's a lie." This is not an overnight fix, but it can be a permanent one. It is not easy and will take time, effort, and diligence. For me, it also took stubbornness and tenacity. Many people just don't want to do the work. For those not willing to do the work needed, the program will fail and they will continue to be plagued with negativity and irrational behavior, triggered by the negative spirits. This worked for me and, providing there is no organic damage to the brain, it can work for anyone who utilizes it consciously and diligently. There is no compromise. You are not the awful person these entities tell you that you are. Those are lies. Your subconscious mind needs to know that what it recorded in your early years is false information. It learns this by repetition. Consider the alternative of not making the effort. Have no doubt that these beings are energy parasites and will feed off of you until you change the programming in your subconscious mind or until you are dead. They need you for your negative energy to survive. They don't give a damn about you other than as a food source. Once you have worked this program as described above and absolutely know this works, you will be able to teach others the same thing with great ease. This method is not to be found in the textbooks, but should be.